All right, so in Section 8.1, we just kind of got the basics and the introduction with some new terminology for these confidence intervals. In Section 8.2, we're going to specifically look at a one-sample interval for the proportion. So in this section, we are going to be dealing with qualitative data. So suppose you want to estimate the population proportion P. So as an example, you may be curious about what proportion of students at your school smoke, or you could wonder what is the proportion of accidents caused by teenage drivers who did not have a driver's education class, and so on. So in this case, we're looking at qualitative data. So in this case, we are going to be looking at the acronym PANIC with some of the same letters that we saw in phantoms and standing for those same things. So again, the first thing that we're going to do as we're doing inferential statistics is we need to talk about the parameter it is that we are interested in estimating. So in this case, that parameter for qualitative data is going to be the proportion of all objects that are in some category of interest. And then p hat is our random variable that we'll get information from the sample. So that's our proportion of n randomly selected objects that are in that category of interest. Okay. Every one of these inferential procedures has its own set of assumptions. Okay, so these are the same assumptions that we looked at in the last section, with the exception now that instead of p, we don't know p anymore, so we're going to use p hat as a point estimate for p. So we can either check that np hat is at least 10 and n1 minus p hat is at least 10, or oftentimes we're not given the sample proportion. Oftentimes we're given the number of objects in the category. So this is the same as just checking that, you know, the number of objects in the category is at least 10 and the number of objects in the other category is also at least 10. And again, cap n, we're going to assume that cap n is at least 20 times little n if that piece of information is not given. N still stands for name the procedure, and in this case, you know, we would be doing the one proportion z interval would be the test that we would be running. All right, so, and I should say not test, but the procedure. So one proportion z interval, because now we are looking at a confidence interval. We did one proportion z test in the last unit because we were running a hypothesis test. So for number 4, now we have the letter I that's going to stand for the interval estimate, so getting that confidence interval. So we're going to start with our point estimate. So for qualitative data, that's going to be p hat. And we can get that confidence interval on our calculator. So we're going to go into stat test menu again, and we're going to scroll and find that one proportion z interval. On the input screen, you'll be asked to input your sample data, x out of n, so that's from your sample, and then your confidence level here. Okay, so there's a decimal in front of that, so 0.95. And that's, again, that's going to be a common confidence level that we'll be looking at. And then when you hit calculate on the output screen, you'll have your interval estimate and your point estimate and just a reminder about what your sample size was. And then our C here stands for conclusion in the context of the data. So we're going to write then that we are C%, so whatever that was, again, a common one's going to be 95%, that the proportion of all objects that are in some category of interest is between whatever that lower endpoint and upper endpoint is that we see on the output screen. So again, in this case, the acronym PANIC will help us remember the 5 steps that we need for an interval procedure.